Okay, so I tried the skirt on that I'm making my friend. I tried it on her. It fit great, except it was a little bit bigger at the hip than what she wanted. So we decided to just take it in a 1/2 inch. She didn't really want to take in a full inch, but a 1/2 inch was good. So then what I did, I came back to my pattern that I had done, and I went to the hip, brought it in 1/8 of an inch right here at the hip. So I brought that in 1/8 of an inch, and this I left. And so I just took my Variform and I went from here down and drew it. And then because what we do at the hip, we have to go all the way down. So then I took 1/8 of an inch all the way down. So I did the same thing here. You can see where I've kind of cut that off a little bit. So I took 1/8 of an inch off, I measured it back, redid that curve, and went all the way down. You might not think 1/8 of an inch is much, but when you times it by 4 seams, 4 pieces, it's 1/2 an inch, so it made a difference. Okay, so now my pattern is the same as what the changes I needed to make for the fit, to fit it. Okay, so now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to make a lining pattern. So here's my skirt back lining pattern. So what I did is, because on the lining, I don't really need a 1-inch seam allowance. I'm not really fitting and I don't want the extra bulk. So what I did is I traced the pattern and I just traced it at the seam line. So I traced the pattern at the seam line. I added 5/8 here, and then I added 5/8 here, and at the hem I only need 1 inch. Okay, so you can see on this one where I drew in the seam line. On this one I just redid the cutting line, so either one works. So once I get that done, I've traced the pattern. Okay, now what changes do we need to make to the pattern for the lining? First of all, you don't have to sew your darts in again. You can just make a tuck right here to take out the extra. And the other thing is you want to add 1/8 of an inch to the waist and 1/4 of an inch at the hip. Now the reason you want to do that is so there's a little bit extra at the lining, so that the lining can help to support the skirt. So if there's a little bit at the lining, then if it, as people sit and walk and do different things, it'll the lining will help create the shape so that if the lining might stretch out a little bit or get the wear, but the skirt fabric won't as much. So it just kind of protects and helps the longer life for your skirt. Okay, so what I did is, you can see here on this, here's my 5/8 seam line. And then I went out 5/8 here, and I added 1/8 here and 1/4 inch here. So I redrew that, and you can use your Variform to redraw that. But then from the hip to the hem, you want to come back into the regular seam line. So on this one, you might just want to use a straight edge ruler because it is a straight skirt. So basically, I just, like, this was the straight edge, just go out like that and draw that in. And then if this creates a dip here, just kind of smooth that out. So then on this one, what I did on this one is I drew in, instead of drawing the whole 1 inch or the seam line, I just went out 5/8 from the cut edge and then just drew that line in. So here's this. So I went out 5/8 from the cut edge all the way down, and 5/8 from the seam, and then I added 1/8 to the waist and 1/4 to the hip, and then I redrew that. So now I can go ahead and trim those. Okay, so I'm gonna trim those off, and then I'm ready to cut out my lining.